Lovely. And I will introduce our speaker for this evening. So today we are joined by Miranda Spraggs, who I'm absolutely thrilled to say is part of my cohort at the University of Hertfordshire, who's studying for their PhD. And we are looking at the materiality of secret keeping concealed objects in buildings. I'm very, very excited for this one, Miri, so I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Claire. And thank you everyone for coming on a Monday evening to listen to me talk about weird and wonderful things. I'm a final year history PhD student at the University of Hertfordshire, as Claire said, and my research explores miscellaneous concealed objects from Britain and Ireland. It's a bit of a strange mix of social history, material culture studies, and folklore. And my research focus is on the secrets and emotions that people squirrel away inside the fabric of buildings. There are a few little content warnings for this talk. There will be brief references to murder, infanticide, slavery, pregnancy loss, alcoholism, and addiction. Hopefully it's gonna change slide. There we go. So what are concealed objects? A concealed object is any item that was deliberately tucked away from view within the fabric of a building. The most common location where objects are discovered are a building's gaps and openings, beneath floorboards, within chimneys, and behind walls. Finds are also reported from bricked up ovens, sealed voids, under eaves, between bricks, above door lintels, beneath windows, within rafter and roof spaces, and concealed within building thatch. Concealment locations can be open or closed. Closed locations are sealed, so they're inaccessible once the item has been concealed, if it's sealed away during construction work. Open locations, such as beneath floorboards, remained accessible, so that objects could be added and removed from the deposit over time. Sometimes floorboards were adjusted to make them easier to raise, and therefore to function as a more effective storage space. In old buildings, huge amounts of objects can accumulate beneath floorboards in particular. It's not uncommon for a wealth of lost objects to be recovered beneath the floorboards from buildings like National Trust properties, for instance. Many of these will be accidental losses that have slipped between the gaps in floorboards. However, others will have been deliberately stashed away. So what objects are deliberately concealed? The simple answer is lots of weird and wonderful stuff. Basically anything you can think of. But I'll very briefly touch on perhaps like the most recognizable groups of concealed objects, all of which have strong folkloric associations. Concealed shoes, witch bottles, and mummified caps. These are also the items that frequently appear in museum exhibitions about magic. So concealed shoes. On the left, we have a concealed shoe. In the 1950s, June Swan, keeper of the boot and shoe collection at Northampton Museum, realised that numerous discoveries were being reported of concealed shoes within old buildings. She began pioneering research to document these finds, and the Concealed Shoe Index, dedicated to recording them, now stands at more than 3,000 examples. Swan suggests that shoes were selected for concealment as they uniquely retain the shape, the personality, the essence of the wearer. Shoes are believed to have been concealed to promote good luck and the well-being and protection of a building's inhabitants. The shoes discovered are typically heavily worn and in poor condition, indicative of a long period of use prior to concealment. Men, women, and children's shoes are discovered, and sometimes entire shoe families. Finds typically date to between the 17th and 19th centuries. Despite the widespread nature of this practice, there is little documentary evidence regarding the custom, but shoes do have many folkloric associations with both luck and fertility. The shoe depicted here was discovered in 2013 inside a void behind the plaster to the left of the fire in the kitchen area at Epworth Old Rectory, North Lincolnshire, alongside a miscellaneous cast iron object and some twisted twigs. Next up we have witch bottles. That's the name given to the 17th century stoneware and glass vessels used in precautions against witchcraft and bewitchment. Their contents most frequently include pins, nails, urine, and nail clippings. The most recognisable witch bottles are these with the stoneware bellamines with these distinctive faces on the front. And finally, we have concealed cats. Mummified cats and rats are another surprisingly common find from buildings. They regularly appear in museum collections and they're sometimes displayed as curiosities in pubs. Some cats were likely deliberate concealments, others represent beloved pet burials, and others simply lost cats that tragically became stuck. News reports for cats becoming stuck in chimneys are not uncommon, and there's plenty of cute videos on YouTube of cats being rescued from fireplaces. I remember discussing my research with one of my neighbours, and she mentioned that years ago her uncle's cat went missing, and it was discovered years later, tragically mummified within a wall where it had got stuck. Yeah, so concealed cats are a rather spooky find, and it's easy to see why they'd be unsettling for the people who discover them. It's a very brief overview of academic research on building concealments. So around the same time that June Swan recognised the significance of concealed shoe finds, Ralph Merrifield, a Roman specialist at the Museum of London, was working on a study of ritual deposition practices across the millennia. In 1987, during his retirement, he published The Archaeology of Ritual and Magic. Throughout his career, Merrifield identified potential archaeological examples of magical practice and ritual. He felt these had been neglected by mainstream scholarship due to their association with fantasy fiction and occultism. Merrifield noticed the concealment of a range of objects within buildings, and he offered several potential interpretations for this material, including a function as apotropaic devices and sentimental gestures. His work has had a lasting and important impact on concealment studies. In 1998, Dinah Eastop introduced the Deliberately Concealed Garments Project. This studied concealed clothing deposits discovered within buildings and was based at the Textile Conservation Centre, then part of the University of Southampton. As with shoes, the garments discovered within buildings are typically heavily worn and often show signs of numerous repairs prior to concealment. Apotropaic objects expert Brian Hoggard has been collecting examples of concealed objects for more than 2 decades. He manages the website Apotropeos, which is an important source of information on these finds. In 2015, Ronald Hutton edited a volume bringing together a range of experts on building concealments, and in 2021, Kerry Holbrook and Owen Davies published Building Magic, re-examining examples of concealed objects from post-medieval structures. This material has also featured in several recent museum exhibitions on the subject of magical material culture. These include Spellbound at the Ashmolean Museum in 2018 and 2019, and Do You Believe in Magic at Bristol Museum and Art Gallery. So my research doesn't focus on shoes, cats, or witch bottles. Instead, I'm concerned with all of the other weird and wonderful miscellaneous things that are squirreled away within buildings, and what these objects can tell us about the emotional lives and secrets of those who concealed them. So one particularly endearing example of this is children's letters to Father Christmas, which are discovered tucked away inside chimneys in the hope they would reach the man himself. These letters give us insight into children's festive hopes and dreams. One example, from 1911, discovered on the chimney shelf of a Dublin fireplace, asks for a baby doll and a waterproof with a hood and a pair of gloves and a toffee apple and a gold penny and a silver sixpence and a long toffee. The letter also contained drawings and a good luck message for Santa. These stories of rediscovered Christmas letters are often published as feel-good news stories close to Christmas. In several instances, the sender had been reunited with their letter years later, and they reflected on the changes they've observed to the Christmas season over the decades. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the general consensus is that it's become much more commercial. The buildings we inhabit are emotional landscapes. We affect these spaces, and in turn they affect us. Choosing to squirrel something away within the fabric of a building, rather than leaving it on display or disposing of it permanently, is a conscious decision and an act of engagement and communication with our surroundings. Here we have some old rubbish. Some of these engagement with our surroundings can be pretty lazy and boring. On the left, we have an example that's from America, some 1970s McDonald's packaging that was discovered discarded in a wall cavity. On the right, we have a flattened cigarette packet, one of several discovered during renovation work beneath the floorboards at Buckingham Palace. Despite the seemingly mundane nature of the find, it was reported in several regional newspapers, being used to illustrate stories about local manufacturing heritage. And here we have some Reddit comments about rediscovered rubbish. It's very common for rubbish to be discarded during building work, sealed up in a convenient void. Where floorboards can be lifted, rubbish can be swept underneath. Cigarette packets and sweet packaging could be flattened and pushed beneath the gaps between floorboards. Rubbish-filled voids within buildings can sometimes function as what the archaeology Rainer Atzber refers to as inner house middens, and large assemblages of finds can be valuable resources for under-the-floorboard archaeology. In the 20th century, some rural British households still did not have organised refuse collection, and so waste would be reused, recycled, and tipped as appropriate. Therefore, it's not entirely surprising that handy household voids could be used for this task. Assortments of rubbish are interesting too. They can inform us about changing consumption patterns, product design, and they serve as a reassuring reminder of the human tendency towards laziness across the ages. To quote the archaeologist Beatrix Nutz, to throw something away is a conscious decision too. Sometimes it's animals who are responsible for concealing things in buildings. Birds will make their nests in chimneys, and these can sometimes include slightly unexpected items like small toys, bits of metal, and even stolen underwear, like Sylvanian families figures. They've been found in birds' nests. Rats and mice will also secrete away domestic objects for use in their nests and bedding. The items depicted here on the right were uncovered from rat middens at a historic house in South Carolina. The rather weird picture on the left comes from a recent UK Reddit post. It's lots of pasta that was discovered behind a bathroom wall when a shower was removed, and it's probably the result of a rodent food store. But there were some comments in the discussion from people who as children would hide disliked food in convenient holes in the wall to dispose of it and avoid parental ire. So even the most mundane finds can be evidence of personality quirks and secretive behaviour. Moving on to more emotional and deliberate concealments. Shame and guilt are powerful and negative emotions, so it's not surprising that we find evidence of concealed addictions and habits that may have been a source of guilt or have led to worry about condemnation if these behaviours were discovered. Stashes of old alcohol bottles, betting slips, and pornography are common finds beneath floorboards. It is poignant to uncover evidence of addiction, and how people respond to these finds likely reflects their own emotional histories and the type of material discovered. The discovery of a handwritten script for a pornographic movie highly amused the renovator who discovered it, whereas stashes of alcohol bottles have been described as very distressing by their finders, who felt empathy for the plight of those who concealed them. These finds are the material evidence of the secrets people try to keep. Concealments motivated by anxiety. Sometimes people concealed objects because they were unnerved by them. They were a source of fear and anxiety. There are several examples of concealed photos that appear to contain ghostly figures, likely the result of double exposure. It is possible these images unsettled the owners so sufficiently that they felt compelled to remove them from view. This 1960s example was discovered beneath floorboards during renovation work in Lancashire. The unnerved finders returned it to its hiding spot after seeking information about the image online. Similarly, we also find concealed Ouija boards, sometimes defaced, and likely concealed after an unsettling experience or perhaps viewing a horror movie. This example is from the collection of the Museum of Witchcraft and Magic in Boscastle, and it was discovered plastered into a fireplace. Between 2004 and 2005, anthropologist Jane Parrish carried out ethnographic research on the relationships people form with cheap collectibles and the role of these items as lucky objects. Parrish found examples of people keeping objects they were too afraid to dispose of because of the perceived risk of misfortune as a result. We may be worried about the consequences of fully disposing of or destroying an object, particularly if it's perceived to have supernatural or occult powers. Items that could cause unease could therefore be imprisoned by concealing them in a liminal zone between keeping and discarding, trapping them within the fabric of the home. But the same could be true of any item that triggered an unpleasant emotional response for any reason, perhaps because it recalled unwanted or painful memories. There can be something cathartic about removing an object from view that is a source of unease or negative emotions. Concealments to conceal guilt. These are not necessarily concealments made because someone felt guilty, although that may have been the case, but they are all items that could have been used to prove someone's guilt or involvement in a crime or offence. This includes the concealment of stolen goods, possession of banned texts, blackmail material, and stored weapon caches. Some concealed items may represent macabre trophies rather than a source of guilt. When thatch was removed from a cottage belonging to the murderer George Jacob Gilbert, executed in 1862, possessions of his victims were recovered. Walls, floorboards, and chimneys were, and continue to be, popular locations to conceal stolen goods. Sometimes these finds can be really weird. For instance, in 1849, Irish police discovered the carcass of a stolen sheep hidden within the thatch of a cottage. Got a few examples here from newspapers. For example, hoard of poison hidden in wall. In 1924, poison described as sufficient to kill many people was discovered in a hole in the wall at the Blue Anchor Hotel, Byfleet. Loose bricks had been placed over the hole to conceal its location. And in 1930, a Burnley labourer, Matthew Daly, went on trial on charge of breaking into the shoemaking department at Coldstone's mental institution and stealing boots and leather. These were hidden up a chimney in his home. Formally charged, Daly said he admitted everything, bar the boots. Sadly, but perhaps unsurprisingly, evidence of murder and the remains of murder victims are also discovered concealed within buildings. Please note that this section does include discussion of violence against women. In 1930, Mrs. Ivy Emma Thick, aged 23, vanished from home, leaving behind her 1-year-old daughter and taking no belongings. Her husband, Edwin Claude Thick, aged 26, a bricklayer, did not report her disappearance. The alarm was instead raised when her father grew concerned. Ivy's remains were discovered within a wall cavity at her marital home. In a horrible and brutal act of violence, her body had been cut into pieces and wrapped in sheets and clothing prior to concealment. Later the same day, her husband was traced and charged with murder. In reply, he said, he has got it right there, I think. The following year, in an unrelated incident, the Liverpool Daily Post reported that a woman's arm was discovered in a wall in a small room at the back of the station master's office at a railway station near Bolton. It was believed to have been in the wall for some time prior to discovery, and sadly there are many similar case studies. It is not, perhaps unsurprisingly, finds of human remains can be deeply unsettling and permanently change a person's emotional experience of the space they inhabit. They may worry that their home could be haunted. The victim, discovered in a wall or beneath floorboards, is a recurrent trope in both folkloric ghost stories and horror fiction narratives. It's not only human remains, however, that can invoke discomfort. Many ghost stories surround concealed finds, with numerous finders reporting feelings of unease and even supernatural activity after the objects were uncovered or removed. June Swan recounted examples of finders feeling their homes were disturbed and attributing periods of bad luck to the removal or disturbance of concealed shoes. And I've had several people report feelings of anxiety and fear following the discoveries in their home or workplaces. Got a few more examples of concealed human remains. Fortunately, not all of them are evidence of violence and murder. Some instead represent old museum items, curios, souvenirs from travels, or medical specimens. For instance, in 2021, bones were discovered behind a Victorian wall during construction work at the Roman Catholic Mount St Bernard Abbey chapter house. Examination of the remains revealed that they were those of 2 individuals and had formed part of an anatomy display. Some bones were wired together and numbered. The Abbey theorised that the remains came from an educational facility that no longer required them, and so they were buried during the construction work. The decision was taken to return the bones to their resting place, and to erect a memorial to these unknown individuals. Sometimes it's living people themselves who are the concealed secret. In 1895, a man wanted for burglary and jewel theft was discovered hiding beneath the front parlour floorboards of his mother-in-law's home in Portsmouth. Meanwhile, in 1989, a man sentenced for burglary was found by the police inside the wall next to the fireplace in the living room of his girlfriend's home. And poignantly, during World War I, a soldier's wife was sentenced for helping her husband, who had deserted from the army, hide in a chimney at their home. Also extremely poignant is the discovery of the concealed remains of infants and babies. These may be the evidence of concealed pregnancy loss, stillbirth, or infanticide, to quote from Building Magic by Kerry Holbrook and Owen Davies. Through the late 19th and early 20th century, numerous such mummified babies were found concealed in different parts of houses in Britain. These would often be discovered by chimney sweeps. These are concealments that would have invoked powerful emotions in both those concealing them and those who discover them. In 2024, the skeleton of a baby was discovered beneath the floorboards of a house in County Durham. Examination revealed that it was hidden more than a century ago and wrapped in a newspaper dated to 1910. Twine was discovered around the skeleton's neck, suggesting that it had likely been murdered. Mr. Sutherland, the detective working on the case, said it is really important to me that the story is told and that we give the baby a full and dignified funeral. On the left, in the picture, we have a mysterious fabric parcel that was discovered by a family within a covered void in the wall next to the central hearth of their medieval cottage in Bury St Edmunds. The deposit also contained shoes, clothing fragments, paper clippings, and 2 small potential fabric dolls. The items were dated to the 18th and 19th century. When x-rayed, the fabric parcel revealed that it contained 2 small rings and a mass. It is possible that these are the remains of a miscarried fetus. In this case, this concealment may represent an act of grief and memorial for a lost child. In December 2002, an assemblage of artefacts was discovered under the attic of No. 1 Church Street, Cuckfield. The collection was deemed particularly interesting because of its wide range of objects. All items in the assemblage, with the exception of an 18th century shoe and a woman's pump from the first part of the 19th century, date from between 1860 and 1914. Research has shown that the Atwater family lived at the house from the mid-1880s, and they still featured at the address in the 1901 census. This curious assemblage of objects, likely an assortment of belongings no longer required by their owners, were perhaps repurposed as a form of time capsule or sentimental deposit. Perhaps these items, squirreled from sight, provide glimpses into a family's history and the emotional ties to the mundane bits of material culture that we all accumulate during the course of a human life. As discussed previously, the concealed objects that are rediscovered are typically heavily worn items of minimal financial value. They had been used and associated with the household for a long time. As well as making them suited to performing any intended apotropaic function, they may have also held emotional significance and been vehicles for family memory. Humans are capable of attaching emotional significance and forming bonds with items that on first glance may appear worthless. Signs of wear and usage may reflect physical engagements with the objects and thus increase their emotional significance. Such items may be treasured heirlooms or gifts from beloved family members. Time capsules often feature contributions from children, and I think it's interesting that we may also see that in concealed deposits. There's been discussion of concealments containing families of objects, but perhaps less on the potential collaborative role that children may have played in their creation. Children might have offered up objects for inclusion in concealments, and this might have been a fun and engaging way for them to engage with their home. Time capsules are widely possessed as possessing an inherent entertainment and novelty value, and the same is likely true of some building concealments. Some items were concealed because their possession could lead to persecution. We find concealed prohibited literature, religious and political material, as people kept secret their beliefs or aspects of their identity, such as their sexuality, that could potentially result in harassment or persecution. This book is one of 3 that were discovered concealed up a chimney by builder George Johnson in 1881. It had been in the chimney for around 300 years. The books discovered were prayer books in English, including one written by Queen Catherine Parr, the 6th and final wife of King Henry VIII. It's the first book published by an English woman under her own name. A letter was found with the concealed books, suggesting they were hidden during the reign of Mary I, often nicknamed Bloody Mary for her persecution of Protestants. Objects would also be concealed for safekeeping during periods of turmoil and uncertainty. At Dollardstown House in Ireland, silverware, including teapots, trays, and cutlery, were discovered beneath the floorboards, wrapped in newspaper dated to 1916. It's believed this was concealed by the Campbell family, who were concerned their home would be ransacked during the Easter Rising. In Orkney, the bones of St Magnus, originally the centrepiece of a shrine, were rediscovered concealed within a pillar in 1919. It is believed they were hidden safely to protect them during the Reformation. Prior to the rise of deposit banking, it was common for people to hide money and valuables within their home. Within the chimney and beneath the floorboards were popular storage locations for valuable possessions. And when these are discovered, they can be worth considerable amounts of money. There are a few examples here. And they can also generate considerable interest and, not surprisingly, disputes about ownership. In shared spaces, such as schools, prisons, workhouses, and barracks, where privacy and furniture were limited, concealment locations were highly prized as valuable storage places for personal items. The things that we find hidden, they're not always valuable, but instead they held sentimental or personal value. Or for instance, in places where tobacco was scarce, we find a lot of concealed pipes. Over here, on the left, we have a tin of mince pies. These were a gift from a mother to her sailor son in World War II, and she sent them alongside a letter. They were discovered remarkably well preserved under the floorboards at the Lock Hotel in Douglas on the Isle of Man during renovations in 1998. But yeah, it's very common for items to have been safely stored away and then they just were never retrieved until they turn up years later in renovations. Another curious concealment for safeguarding was discovered beneath the floorboards of a Welsh school. It's unclear where this crocodile originated. Some stories suggest it was brought back from the travels of a World War I veteran. It was seemingly concealed beneath the school floorboards to protect it, potentially during World War II. Its existence was considered to be a legend and a popular piece of school folklore until it was rediscovered during renovation work, and the crocodile is now on display in the school. My personal favourite concealed items, though, are letters and diaries. The content is often not very exciting, just news, messages to friends, and reflections on everyday life, but they really do provide poignant insight into the private emotional lives of people in the past. Letters between 2 friends, Jack Cox and Elsie Turnham, dated between 1917 and 1918, were discovered tucked behind the chimney stack in a roof space at the Five Arrows Hotel. Jack updated Elsie on his life at the front, and Elsie sent him pictures and news from home. A letter dating to 1940 was discovered under the floorboards of a house in Bournemouth. The woman writing to her darling Reg hoped her father would give them permission to marry. These items often capture the imagination of their finders, with people keen to track down the writers or their descendants, which is perhaps not always ideal. Sometimes the information in these letters can be quite sensitive. There are letters about affairs, illegitimate children. I mean, would we necessarily want to be contacted out of the blue about our parents' or grandparents' love lives? In Charlotte Bronte's Villette, the heroine Lucy Snow buries letters from her unrequited love in a sealed bottle beneath a tree, a cathartic act of grieving, and some concealments may have functioned in a very similar way. Not all letters necessarily reached their intended recipients. They may have been sealed and stored away instead of sent. A love letter in a sealed envelope, believed to date to 1911, was discovered beneath wooden floorboards on the 3rd floor of a property in Cork. Concealing the letter may have been a way of processing emotions that could not be expressed. Letters can also become a source of pain following a breakup, and may have been concealed for this reason, or else to hide them from a new relationship. And here we have some tabloid coverage of rediscovered letters, very dramatic headlines. We do also find breakup letters and evidence of illicit affairs. These may sometimes have been kept for financial blackmail purposes. These letters often chart the decline of a relationship and the resulting squabbles about property and money. We also find examples of concealed graffiti. Perhaps the most common forms of graffiti are names and tags, but even something as seemingly simple as a name can have a powerful emotional impact. In May 1981, an innocent 14-year-old girl named Julie Livingstone was killed during the Northern Irish Troubles by a rubber bullet fired by a British soldier. Her mother commented on the emotional power that a simple scribbled name can hold. The despair would hurt you now and again. Most days you get it some point of the day. I'll never get rid of her name. She wrote it anywhere, inside the airing cupboard and on books. I was changing a pillow and she had written her name on the inside of it. In the kitchen, just under the cooker, under the wallpaper. She must have lifted a brush and written her name on the bare wall. Concealed graffiti can offer us glimpses of a wide array of emotions. Concealed messages provide insight into people's values, personalities, and desire to mark their presence in history when conventional narratives may attempt to render them invisible. Concealed graffiti is a way to leave behind a covert trace of ourselves when more open self-expression may be punished or prohibited. Sometimes people choose to conceal graffiti relating to their political affiliations. In the collection of the Ulster American Folk Park is an oak wall panel that once formed part of the first-class staircase of the B deck of the RMS Olympic, sister ship to the infamous RMS Titanic, and similarly doomed RMS Britannic. Unlike her sister ships, the Olympic's career spanned 24 years from 1911 until 1935. The ship became unprofitable following the Great Depression, after which she was withdrawn from service and sold for scrap. The wall panels were sold at auction and purchased by the Hadrian Paintworks at Haltwhistle, Northumberland. During the process of installation, shipyard graffiti was discovered on the reverse of the panel reading "No Home Rule." This example of concealed graffiti afforded an opportunity for an impassioned shipyard worker to express their blunt opinion on an extremely controversial political opinion at the time of the Olympics construction. In 1992, a plank of wood dated to 1850 was discovered in St Ives Town Hall. On the reverse there was a concealed message believed to have been written when the building was constructed. The text mostly consists of complaints about the inadequate quantities of beer supplied during the job. Here, concealed graffiti was used to vent and as a vehicle for cathartic grumbling that the workers may have been unwilling or unable to openly express to their employer. Writing about concealed shoes, Fiona Pitt suggests that these items may have afforded a way for people of limited literacy to leave their mark, a type of physical graffiti in places of deep personal significance. In Building Magic, Davies and Holbrook also stress that not all concealers would have been literate, and may have resorted to personal objects to represent a similar snapshot of their lives and times. Concealment of these tangible physical objects, like scrawling a graffiti tag, could have functioned as a way to commemorate and declare one's presence in a space. Concealing an object allowed for an emotional form of engagement with a building, without the necessity of being able to read or write. A particularly poignant example of the desire to leave a mark, and one indicative of the atrocities of the past, was discovered when the Rogan House, Sumner County, Tennessee, a mid-1820s building, was dismantled and moved to the Ulster American Folk Park. 2 bricks from the building were discovered to have a footprint and handprint upon them. These marks were likely created by enslaved children. Enslaved people were skilled in brickmaking and bricklaying and therefore likely assisted in the construction of the house. The concealment of coins, newspapers, and time capsules was likely done to mark the date of building work. The concealment of coins is a commonly employed method of commemorating or marking a date that building work was undertaken, a secretive builder's dating memento, parable to the visible date stones prominently displayed upon buildings. Coins, especially silver sixpence, would also be concealed as lucky items. But coins are not the only items employed for the purpose of dating building work. Newspapers are also frequently employed for this function. At the Mound, Edinburgh, a carefully folded North Britain newspaper, dated to Wednesday the 6th of May 1868, was discovered in the wall of the ground floor reception hall. The Mound Museum notes that the newspaper was discovered carefully folded, so presumably deliberately placed during building work during the 1868 extension. The newspaper was likely concealed to both provide a date to the work and a snapshot into the times. Dated pages removed from books could serve the same purpose. At a house in Whittlesea, a page from a book dating to December the 18th, 1832, was discovered on the reverse of a fragment of wallpaper. It seems likely that it was concealed to mark the date the wallpaper was applied. Clay pipes with decorative dates have also been recycled for this function. Pipes are another class of object that, like coins and newspapers, would have been readily available on building sites. The clay pipe celebrating Queen Victoria's 1897 Diamond Jubilee, discovered beneath the hearthstone of a house in Brockley, southeast London, was likely concealed for dating purposes. Of course, we also find time capsules, which was initially coined as a marketing phrase in 1938 by the Westinghouse Electric Company. The example in the picture was concealed in 1983 in the walls of a former stable in Suffolk. A typical example of a builder's time capsule was concealed in 1909 at the southeast corner of the Playfair building, the Royal College of Surgeons, Edinburgh, and rediscovered in 2014. It had originally been concealed by the joiners who worked on the extension of the college in 1909. Contained within an empty tin of Kendall Brown scented snuff was the following: 2 newspapers, both dated to March the 19th, 1909, a copy of the Labour Leader, a weekly journal of socialism, trade unionism and politics, the Illustrated Carpenter and Builders, 2 postcards depicting the Scottish National Exhibit of 1908, and a piece of paper listing the names of the joiners from Scott Morton & Co. who carried out work during construction. This builder's time capsule offers insight into the items that the concealers felt summarised the times, their political affiliations, and their trade. The contents of this deposit was thoughtfully curated to afford potential future finders insight into the lives and identities of those who concealed it. There is a human desire to commemorate, to mark the passage of time and the changes that occur as we experience the inevitabilities, insecurities, and turbulence of the human life course. We also commemorate key moments in the biographies of buildings: construction, alteration, and demolition. The creation of a deposit can mark a rite of passage for the building. The next category of items concealed to commemorate building work are those that include a note or letter, often encased within a bottle, as we see with messages in bottles at sea. These may consist of a simple list of names, or else an intentional act of communication with the future, with the letter addressed to the future finder and containing information that the concealer believed would be of interest. A scrap of wallpaper was discovered behind the skirting board during renovations of a villa on the Isle of Mull. Written on it was a note listing the names of the painters involved in the work and the date, September the 2nd, 1914. It also provides some very brief commentary on ongoing global events: the Great War, Germans getting wiped out. Another example of a concealed message was posted on the DIY UK subreddit. The reverse of the door panel had a hidden note written on it by the builders working in January and February 1947. In their message, they comment on ongoing events, including the Great Freeze, and conclude that the country is in a hell of a state. They lament on the high cost of living and record prices for several items, remarking that, "and this is under a Labour government. Happy days if we live long enough." These types of concealed notes feel reminiscent of diary entries, with a similar, at times rather discordant combination of frank emotional expression and commentary on local and global events that the writer considered to be significant. It is likely that the concealers of this plank of wood believed that the information would be of historic interest to whomever uncovered the message in the future, and the inclusion allowed them to contextualise themselves within a broader historical narrative. The choice of concealed bottles can reflect differences in social class. Often builders' notes are discovered concealed within old beer, whiskey, mineral water or soda bottles, the vessels readily available to workers on a job. In some cases, however, more luxurious bottles were recycled for concealment. At Chawton House, Hampshire, a champagne bottle was repurposed when wealthy Montague Knight concealed a note under the Great Hall floor in 1868. Some concealments just represent sentimental acts of whimsy. At Christchurch Cathedral, Grafton, a small porcelain doll is located in the brickwork above the west doors. You can see it here on the right in the orange box. The accompanying explanation states that in 1883, a young girl named Bella Greenway asked a builder working on the construction of the cathedral how the work would be funded. He explained that people would donate gifts to the church, and so Bella offered up her doll. The builder accepted the gift and set it into the church wall. When the wall was demolished in 1937, the doll was removed, cleaned, and placed in the new west wall where it can be seen today. On the left, we have a slightly more sinister-looking doll. On the 26th of January 1977, the Southampton Evening Echo reported that a mysterious doll had been discovered pinned and concealed among the rafters of a barn attached to the city's Tudor House Museum, an area which forms part of the present museum's workroom exhibition space. The doll was thought to be made of wood, is hollow, and dressed in a red and white shirt. Attached below was a piece of wood with the written inscription, I. Hawthorne, age 2, 1931, visited here. Mr. Adrian Rance, the city's then senior keeper of museums, expressed reluctance to move the doll or take it down for closer examination. But he apparently expressed his opinion that the doll may have belonged to a child who died in a neighbouring cottage. The Echo article postulated, is it a doll at all? Or an effigy to ward away evil spirits, a traditional practice according to folklore? Is there some type of curse attached to the doll, or did it belong to a child who died? Without any follow-up, the Tudor House doll would likely have been filed away as an unsolved mystery. However, a second article appeared in the Southampton Evening Echo on the 16th of February 1977 under the headline, Doll Riddle Solved. The article explains, theories that there may have been some strange reason for the doll's presence have been refuted by Mrs. L. F. Rowthorne, a Southampton woman who read of the mystery in the Echo. Mrs. Rowthorne stepped forwards to explain the actual reason for the item's concealment. The doll belonged to her daughter, Irene, and had broken while they were visiting her father, a corporation carpenter who was working at the museum. Irene had left her doll with her father, and in the evening he informed her that the doll was in a safe place, fixed to the rafters of the museum. Mr. Rowthorne clearly decided to both amuse himself and to commemorate his daughter's visit to the museum by attaching the doll and the accompanying inscription to the rafters. The original Tudor House doll was returned to the Rowthorne family in the 1970s, but that wasn't the end of the doll's story. A small rag doll was placed on the rafters to illustrate the story when the Tudor House Museum reopened after refurbishment in 2011. It's the rag doll you can see in the middle, and it doesn't at all resemble Irene's original doll, and there's nothing sinister about it. But despite its friendly appearance, the doll has become a key component of supernatural narratives about the museum, and is considered to be a trigger object, popular with the many paranormal investigation groups who visit the museum at night. During one ghost hunt, a medium claimed they had a feeling that a little girl was attached to the doll, and that if it was moved, it would make her upset. The group promptly attempted to find objects to throw at the doll in an attempt to knock it down, resulting in staff having to threaten to evict them from the museum if they did not leave it alone. One visitor to the museum, who believed they were sensitive to spirits, claimed that a little girl ghost liked the doll. The visitor advised staff to keep an eye on the doll for the following weeks in case of any changes, but none were observed or reported. We also see self-aware pranks and memes that sort of self-consciously play into horror tropes. So a few recent examples, there was a woman who hid a plastic skeleton in her wall while she was refurbishing. And a similar prank was reported in the Liverpool Echo in 2021. A woman who left a toy doll holding a sinister note behind a wall in her former home has explained why. Primary school teacher Jonathan Lewis discovered a rag doll concealed within the wall of his new home. Accompanying the doll was a note reading, Dear reader/new homeowner, thank you for freeing me. My name is Emily. My original owners lived in the house in 1961. I didn't like them, so they had to go. All they did was sing and be merry. It was sickening. Stabbing was my choice of death for them, so I hope you have knives. Hope you sleep well. And here we have the Wiltshire Museum rat snake. It's a rat skull with a snake's body, originally said to have been joined, and it was found in a wall cavity of a barn built in 1770 in Melksham. It's a really weird object. I have no idea what it is, but I can't help but wonder if it might have been a practical joke or someone's idea of a whimsical concealment because they thought a rat snake was pretty cool. Final object. This is an early 20th century concealment, and it was discovered beneath the floorboards of a house. It's a rubber doll, and it would probably have originally squeaked. As you can see, it's not in a great state, and it's an extremely ambiguous find. Is this a practical joke? Is it rubbish? Is it a builder's whimsical concealment that belonged to their child? Is it some kind of curse? Is it an apotropaic object? We don't know. It's ambiguous, and I think that's why this stuff is so interesting. There's so many potential reasons why people concealed objects within their homes. The buildings we occupy are central to our emotional lives and well-being, and the study of material culture is essential to our understanding of the emotional lives of people in the past. These hidden objects provide fascinating evidence of a wide range of emotions and behaviours, from the concealment of secrets and guilt to storage caches, curated time capsules, messages to the future, practical jokes, and evidence of superstition and folklore. These miscellaneous objects offer a wealth of intriguing insights into the material lives of a building's occupants and the secrets they choose to keep tucked away from prying eyes. Thank you. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
That was absolutely fantastic, Miri. I'm just going to stop recording so we can have a good chat.